perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.
Find a plan that goes with your flow. Get unlimited local talk, text, and data at the most affordable rate with Unlimited Flow Postpaid, only at Docomo Pacific.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
I'm so stupid. During those still commercials for Wendy's and Cold Stone, I didn't turn on my microphone. So the entire time you guys heard nothing that I was saying. I apologize for that. Pardon me. It is 10:33 a.m. Good morning on Saturday, January 25, 2025. My name is Troy Torres. Thank you so much for joining me for this Saturday morning episode of Kandit News and Views. This is the morning look at what our legislators are up to. So in the CNMI legislature, none of the 29 members have introduced legislation yet, so there's nothing to talk about there. In the Guam legislature, at least according to their website, they have not updated the list of bills since January 22nd. So there might be bills that have been introduced since yesterday or since the night before. No, it would be since yesterday. I remember seeing the ticker on the date that said January 23, at least in the morning. So if any bills were introduced after yesterday morning, we don't have access to them from the Guam legislature website. So there's not any new legislation to talk about. But what I do want to talk about is yesterday's oversight hearing. And let me just make sure I have all my stuff here, all my ducks in a row, because I kind of rushed into producing this show. If you don't mind, just I beg your indulgence for a couple of seconds. I think something just shocked me. For a couple of seconds, I'm opening WhatsApp so I can ask Johnny to share this on our Kandit channel on WhatsApp because I can't find my phone. So we have a Kandit channel that someone set up for us. You just go to... Actually, I don't know how... Johnny Rosario, if you're listening, or Eric Rosario, can you put the link to our channel so that if anyone wants to... So the channel is where you would get our website stories and even our notifications of live shows. You'd get our website stories first from there. You would get, in case you don't get the notifications for our live shows from Facebook notifications, you'll get it on this channel. Let me just put here. Can someone... post this to our channel? Now I can't find my phone. to do it. Thanks. Did you, before I get into this oversight hearing, did you guys see, we posted a flyer from Don Don Donkey. They're not our advertiser, but it was just such a good deal. I thought, people should be aware. You know how a dozen roses normally cost like $125? In some cases, you'll see like $175, $200. Roses are very expensive in Guam. Don Don Donkey is selling a dozen roses for $48. They have a bunch of other packages, like, not a dozen roses, but fewer, or like an entire bushel of roses, or whatever it's called. Great prices. So if you are, fixing to get your significant other roses for Valentine's Day or whatever occasion it may be, maybe it's your anniversary, maybe you're going to get married, I don't know, but they've got great deals on roses going on over at Don Don Donkey. Take a look at them now. I mean, you look at all of these other places, and I mean, I guess we just sort of accepted it for a while that we have to import roses, and so therefore that's why it's expensive, right? I don't know how Don Don Donkey does it, but they are selling roses for 1/3 the price of what other places are selling these things at. And so just a little helpful shopping tip. I know there's a crunch on money, right? Anyway, getting into this oversight hearing. Let me close this out first. Yesterday, the Republicans who have just returned to power in the legislature after almost 2 decades out of the legislative majority had their first oversight hearing that they ran in almost 2 decades. And the oversight hearing was timely, not just for us, the public, because we've been clamoring for an oversight hearing. At least those of us who have been paying attention, those of us who are objective and reasonable in our demand for justice. Since the public auditor came out with audits that have had findings and allegations that there's funny business going on at Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense. Timely, this oversight hearing, in the sense that, we've been wanting an oversight hearing to get answers, but also timely in the sense that Republicans, among the things that they campaigned on in November, was return us to legislative power, and we will hold the administration to account. We will be serious about allegations of corruption, whether it's the administration or anywhere else, right? And we're also going to be professional. We're going to be different from how the Democrats ran things. That was among the promises that the Republicans made. And so Shawn Gumataotao, the chairman of the legislative committee, he's a freshman senator. He's the chairman of the legislative committee in charge of, among other things, Homeland Security and Civil Defense. This dude has extensive experience with Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense, extensive experience with emergency management. We worked together in the Camacho administration, and he was, at the time, the Joint Information Coordinator. Also at the time, the first Homeland Security advisor was a guy named Frank Blas Jr., who's now the Speaker of the legislature. So them coming into power, Shawn Gumataotao hitting the ground running, getting this oversight hearing, or doing this oversight hearing. He was in Washington, D.C. for the Trump inauguration. He flew back to Guam. He came in either Thursday night or Friday morning, went straight to work, had this oversight hearing at 2 p.m., and they did not disappoint us. This new crop of senators, not only did they not disappoint us for a bunch of different reasons, but I have a feeling that how well they performed at yesterday's oversight hearing inspired Democrats, the 6 Democrats. There are no new Democrats in the legislature. There's 6 incumbents who were reelected. They all seem to be different in a very good way. And so this praise that I have for yesterday's oversight hearing, not all questions were answered, right? Granted, this praise that I have about this oversight hearing is bipartisan, but it is biased toward the Republicans, because I think that if the Republicans didn't get the legislative majority, there might never have been an oversight hearing, one. And if there was an oversight hearing, it would be like the stale oversight hearings that we saw over the past 2 to 4 years. Stale in the sense that senators, the chairman of the several committees, did not appear to be competent in the issues, or if they were competent and had command of the issues, did not display any fortitude in getting actual answers out of people to the satisfaction of the public. Because what happened yesterday in the oversight hearing, you saw not just a display of professionalism that you haven't seen in the legislature in a long time, but a command of the issues, and no less from freshman senators who've never done this before. This is their first time at the rodeo, or whatever it's called. They're only 2 weeks into office. And it isn't just Shawn Gumataotao, the chairman of the committee, who displayed absolute leadership quality. It was just wonderful to see Shawn Gumataotao in charge of that committee. But you saw freshman senators Sabrina Salas-Matinani, Shelley Calvo, Vince Borja, asking tough questions, asking pointed questions, asking relevant questions. You saw Speaker Frank Blas just large and in charge. I mean, he was not just the Speaker of the legislature, but he had the persona of, I was the first Homeland Security advisor. You cannot BS me. And even though they had this demeanor, these Republicans, they treated the panel with respect. You didn't see the shenanigans that you saw before when the Democrats were in charge. And it wasn't just the Democrats. It was also a couple of Republicans who pulled shenanigans, disrespectful things over the past several years. But now with this leadership change, you really see the legislature starting to shine, starting to regain the confidence of the people in their government. So much so, the Republicans did such a good job. Shawn Gumataotao, Frank Blas, and the other Republicans did such a good job that you could see the change in tone and approach from even the Democrats on both sides of the split Democrat aisle. You saw Tina Muñoz Barnes, Will Parkinson, both of whom are, known for kind of being like the just going along with the administration, right? You saw them asking tough questions. You saw them making declaratory statements about the need for accountability and transparency. You saw Therese Terlahi and Chris Barnett and even Tello Taitigui. They always ask tough questions. They're good at that. They're very good at asking the tough questions. But you saw them professional, respectful, asking things that were relevant. It was just such a well-done oversight hearing. I don't even think it was orchestrated. I don't think that these senators sat in a room and were like, okay, this is what we're going to say. This is what we're going to ask. Everything just flowed because we, the voters, elected senators who actually appear to be competent, who actually appear to know what they're doing, to have a command of the issues. And for areas where they don't have a command of the issues, to ask the right questions, to dig. I mean, I am so impressed. I went into, this public or this oversight hearing thinking, all right, they're going to do a good job. They're going to ask good questions. It's probably going to be respectful, because Republicans generally, when they have the majority, they do things in a much more professional way than Democrats normally do. It's just objectively looking at it, right? I didn't expect to be impressed. Really didn't. Let me show you one clip. This is where I think this is probably the best part. Like, this summarizes everything that happened. This is Frank Blas heavy here, but he just kind of carried the day with the statements and the questioning. And he's the one who he coined the phrase of the oversight hearing was this is a disaster in itself. And so here is, let me switch this over. Just let me know in the comments if you have a problem hearing it or if there's any sort of echoing that happens, okay?
Do that. When was the last time you guys worked on your emergency management response plan from either the EMPG, the HSGP, or your cybersecurity level?
Speaker, if I may add, in 2020, I was still serving as the Adjutant General of the Guam National Guard,
Okay.
and I came on board and assumed this position in June of 23.
Mr. Esteves?
So I was on military duty from October 2020 to came back on assignment of June or end of May of 2023.
Do any of you take responsibility for what has happened?
I take responsibility.
Okay.
Speaker, I take full responsibility. I'm here now, sir. I'm here. I am a
I just want
problem
to make
solver.
sure that that's clear because,
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yes.
You know, when you take on the role, one of the very first things you want to do is making sure your ducks in a row because, as you said, emergency management, you don't know what's going to happen and when.
Absolutely.
Okay? And I think this was a very, like you said, while you view this audits as ways to be able to take care of stuff, the concern was that these audits pointed out to many issues that were perennial, that continued to occur, and nothing was happening. And as a result of that, we've come up now with budget, with monies where it was shortfall, we're not getting paid, unallowable costs, questionable costs, and whatnot. Okay? That's where we're at with this right now. I appreciate the whole presentation with regards to what happens in the disaster, but this is a disaster in itself. Okay? And so, while we're sticking, and I'm just going to stick primarily to part one. Okay? Can any of you, either one of you, explain to me what happened? First, let's talk about the FEMA report. What were the findings in your FEMA report?
General fund or special fund supported agency or program was impacted to cover these costs?
The general fund is the general fund. The general fund in any jurisdiction is ultimately responsible for any shortfall in any other fund, and that was the case here.
I have a couple more questions if I can. So also OPA report number 2407 conveyed that based on the appropriations laws from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2023, that the Office of the Governor's budget request did not include Guam Homeland Security and Office of Civil Defense, even though the entity was a program listed one. Now, the report detailed that the appropriations law for these fiscal years allowed for the governor to transfer appropriations from her office, for example, to only GHS, not GHS and OCD, for matching federal grants. However, if Homeland Security and Civil Defense staff are 100% federally funded, a local fund match of equal amount would be 100%. Now, so for the record, what exactly were the agreed upon grant requirements between the federal government and the government of Guam as a condition for receiving GHS OCD funding from the federal government? Some examples could be a local appropriation, shared costs for employee salaries and benefits, vehicles and other equipment and supplies, utilities and or indirect costs.
Security and the Office of Civil Defense for literally looking at the corrective action plan and making sure that we facilitate and follow through. I think one of the first questions as you guys were doing your presentation was, did the Office of Homeland Security, based on the follow-up and based on the corrective action plan, give the update to the OPA so that he can attach it before this hearing? That was number one. But in all respect to the process moving forward and the issues that have been happening for over a decade, 2010 is what I heard. I'm looking at at what is being submitted today, and you can tell is really, really thick. And I just want to say I appreciate that, because for me, today is more about listening and trying to follow through on what FEMA and what the federal government was saying is how do we recover this 8.4? Are we going to get it or not? Is it lost? But how do we move forward? And in that effort, Mr. Chair, I really just want to ask,
hoping that we won't have to do that personally. I'm hoping if these are programs that are funded in other states through federal grants, that we should absolutely avail of federal grants to fund these programs. So the question is now, perhaps the public auditor, if you wouldn't mind, I know you said we've all read the reports, but I don't think the public necessarily read these reports, but and for me, if you could just again give us a breakdown. So on report number 1, or the audit number 1, part 1 rather, there was a total of 8.4 million owed to the general fund. That was what the final conclusion was, and some of this was findings from DOA first, and then you. Is this recoverable anymore?
I really can't say what years those included. So if the grant is still alive, is still open, then some of it can be recovered if the two agencies and DOA and BBMR provide them documentation that is requested.
All right, but
So those are just snippets. There was a whole lot more that happened. It was more than a 4-hour hearing. One of the smart things that I thought Shawn Gumataotao did was in how he organized the panel. So, sometimes senators, sometimes in the past, legislative committee chairmen sort of waste the public's time and waste the senators' time by putting the pomp and circumstance in the beginning, or, just... And you saw Shawn Gumataotao cut short presentations by Chuck Estevez a couple of times saying, we'll get to that. Let's talk about this. I mean, it was just so highly organized and in a smart way. And among the really smart things that I thought that Shawn Gumataotao did was bring this panel up consisting of the people who the senators should be asking the questions to all at one time. And it was Esther Agigi, Chuck Estevez, Lester Carlson from BBMR, Ed Byrne, who's in charge of the cash of the government, and BJ Cruz. And it was just such an effective strategy at getting answers, because you even saw BJ Cruz interjecting every here and there where he thought that the Homeland Security, civil defense people, for lack of a better term, were not telling the whole picture. We're not giving the whole picture, not telling the entire truth. He was every now and then he would interject and he'd be like, I need to remind everyone, I need to remind senators that this is what the math is. This is what the research said. This is what is really going on here. And these are the questions that we really have and that haven't been resolved yet. And that this is the funding that's going to be lost if something isn't done. And basically what BJ Cruz was saying was there's a whole lot of hope being painted here by these officials, but not a lot of reassurance that that hope is going to translate into something serious, into something real, into the government of Guam not being on the hook for these millions of dollars. And the senators were making the point that if you guys don't get this reimbursement, exactly how is this going to work? Because wouldn't these be then illegal expenditures of local funds, since you guys didn't get an appropriation for this? And so, I mean, it was just such a great oversight hearing. I really hope that that this is how this legislature continues. And moving forward as voters, I hope that we remember the difference between this legislature and the last legislature, and the legislature before that, and before that, and before that. When we go to the polls in 2026, and if this legislature, if this was the tone that was set for the legislature moving forward, and it continues, and it maybe even gets better, then I think we need to remember the comparison when we go to the polls in 2026. And as much as is reasonable, I will applaud these senators for doing a good job. And of course, our job is to criticize and to scrutinize, especially when there are questions. But when senators act and perform the way they did yesterday, I've got nothing but love. Nothing but, I'm impressed, I gotta say. There are outstanding questions. Yes, not everything was answered, but boy, did we get a lot of answers. Did we see a lot? And we saw a legislature in motion that is serious, that is smart and competent, and that means business. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful day. God bless you. Be safe out there, and I love you all.